Thank you so much for being here, Mary. I'm so excited to connect with you and to see you face to face. I've been following your account for a while. And just to kick us off, I'd love to hear about a little bit of what you do, who you're serving right now.
Beautiful. Thanks for having me, Rachel. What do I do? It's really interesting to people when people ask me this question. I say I'm a healer, and saying that I'm a healer is the least niche down way of capturing what I do. But
Yeah.
because I serve in so many different beautiful ways, I oftentimes like to use that as a little hook to see, okay, who's interested
Mhm.
and and diving deeper into the work that I do. So what I'm focused on serving is helping people who have intellectualized their patterns, beliefs, and behavior. So they've done a lot of conscious and cognitive work. They've
Mhm.
read books, they've been to therapy, they've done retreats, they've done a lot of self-development work, and they're looking for the now what. So
Mhm.
they want to embody it, they want to live it, they maybe are thinking about who they would be if their life was a reflection of all of these things that they've acquired in their mind space, but they're
Mhm.
not living it yet. So that space between. So that's what we serve at Ritual and Routine, is helping people to collapse that timeline and to
Mhm.
go from intellectualizing it to actualizing it. So, living it within your body through somatic practices, through energetic practices, which can look anything, because I know that some of those words are still pretty vague. It can be anything from EFT tapping, applied neurology. So, practices that help your nervous system to rewire itself around patterns, beliefs, and behaviors that allow you to be the person that you are at your core essence,
Mhm.
the most you of you. Two, energy healing, working with the energetic body, claiming energetic literacy so that you can understand how powerful it is to tune your energetic body to the unseen world and to work with energy. And especially being, I know this is something that's really big for you, but
Mhm.
being a woman, being in your feminine flow, a lot of times means surrendering, tuning, and receiving. So we focus on that. And then I also am a steward of psychedelic trauma. So
Mhm.
helping people through story and through an educational initiative, helping people who have experienced trauma from psychedelic experiences. So not just a bad trip, but psychedelic trauma, to
Mhm.
be able to find their resources and to come back to baseline and to take spiritual emergency and move into spiritual emergence.
Yes, amazing. Okay, I love all of that. And I love the specificity that you kind of brought that down to, too, especially starting with I'm a healer to like, this is exactly what I do. So thank you for that. So, bringing it back to kind of this concept that you mentioned of a lot of us are like, we're going to therapy, we have awareness of our patterns, but our body still like does the same thing. Like, how do we get our body to actually change? How do we get like our day to day to actually shift? What do you feel like, since this is your realm, like, what do you feel like the thing is that holds people back from making that their reality, like turning it from their brain to their body? Does that make sense?
I think I think it's an educational error. I think
Mhm.
that because top down, so you have top down processing and bottom up processing, right? So top
Mhm.
down is, okay, you're starting from the prefrontal cortex, you're starting from the thinking brain, and you're using the thinking brain in order to change your circumstance. So you're saying, I
Mhm.
see this pattern, belief, and behavior that's happening, and I'm going to use my mind in order to change that, which you can. And that's very beautiful. However, if you are not also understanding that you don't just live in the space of your mind, but that
Mhm.
you have created neural pathways, that you have a nervous system that's been informed by these patterns, beliefs, and behaviors, that has adapted to your circumstances over time in order to provide you with the best possible output given your
Yeah.
circumstances. You have to be able to address all layers of the being. So I see a lot of people who are like, well, I know that I don't want to participate in this behavior. I know I don't believe that belief when I really am grounded into it.
Mhm.
However, when a situation arises, my first reaction is to participate in that behavior, is to believe that belief, because we are animals. And
Mhm.
when we are looking at a bottom up processing, which is starting from the brain stem and working its way up through the brain, then we're understanding that we have cellular memory, that we have primal reflexes that are there to protect us, but that can be wired from things that have happened in our life
Yeah.
to be maladaptive in the end. So if you can speak your body's language and learn to speak your body's language through tools like EFT tapping, through applied neurology, through somatic experiencing, which is using breath, sound, and movement in order to let your body talk, then you're able to create coherence between the mind and the body. So I think for a lot of people, they just don't realize that you can't think your way out of every situation. And truly, I didn't see how your mind is such a powerful vehicle, but I didn't see how important it was to create that coherence until I went through an experience around 3 years ago where I experienced trauma from psychedelics, where it didn't matter how much I thought my way into my healing. I really had to speak and rewire my nervous system using tools that directly impacted my nervous system and directly impacted my energetic body as well. So I think it's really just a deficit and how learning is presented. We live in our minds in this Western society. So it only makes sense that the first mode of action when it comes to self-development work is to use that same vehicle. And our hope and what we've seen as well, I think somatic practices and energetic practices really have become more popular over the past. I know over the past year, I've been noticing how much somatic practice has become at the forefront. So it's beautiful to see that everyone in this industry is reflecting the importance of this coherence.
Absolutely. We're seeing the impacts, and it's basically like somatic hacking.
Exactly. Somatic hacking. It's beautiful.
Yes. How to like hack that pathway. Cause I feel like I haven't had that same experience that you did, but I have struggled with anxiety in the past. And I feel very similar about it, where it's just like, it doesn't make any sense, especially the anxiety that I struggle with. It's just like, it doesn't have to do with anything that I'm thinking about, eating, watching, the environment that I'm in. Sometimes it'll just like come on. And I feel like that's kind of the same thing. It's like my brain has like canaled a certain pathway of like, oh, like we just are going to go down this road for the who knows why. So thinking about it more and more isn't actually going to help. So that's where these practices come in, correct?
Exactly. You need a pattern interrupter. You need, when you start finding yourself, when you're in anxiety too, what happens to your brain? Like, where do you go?
I feel like it just goes straight to panic, honestly, where it's like
And do
something's
you feel in
wrong.
your,
It's like, oh, something's wrong and I don't know what's wrong, essentially. Because I know
and
it's
do you
different
feel,
for everyone. I feel like everyone's like pathway is a little bit different. Like sometimes it's attached to thoughts. For me, it's just like I literally go from like zero to like, oh, something's wrong.
and when you're experiencing that, are you experiencing like a daydream like quality where you're like, something's wrong? Do you feel like you're in your body?
I feel like it probably happens really quickly because it seems like within a matter of seconds, like my heart would race and I would start being like my body would viscerally start responding. So who knows what would happen first, to be honest, if it was like the chicken or the egg, I have no idea because it was so close to each other of like, is it the daydream? And then it's my body responding. I'm not sure. Probably.
Hmm. Yeah, that's so true because sometimes we do find ourselves in the daydream and then our
Mhm.
body starts to respond. But either way, right?
Exactly.
Like when it's happening, it's because we're not dropped in to the
Totally.
present moment.
Mhm.
Anxiety is so interesting. We have so many connotations. I'm just sidebarring us on anxiety here
It's
for a second.
okay. I think this is
But
good. I feel like
because
so
I think it's
many,
important, right? Like
yes,
so many
yeah,
people
it's
suffer with
so
anxiety.
important.
um Anxiety is just us not being in the present. We're either like
Mhm.
reminiscing about something that happened in the past that we wish that happened in some sort of way that didn't
Mhm.
happen, or we're looking into the future and we want to apply control to the future. So
Right.
really interesting how anxiety just sucks you out of the
Totally.
present.
It's so strange. And it's also it just mirrors what you're talking about with like the body's memory, essentially, that like no matter how much we think, no matter how much we go to talk therapy, like our body has memory within it. And really the only way to kind of have that hack happen is by speaking the language of the body. You can't speak the language of the mind or speak the language of like our logical reasoning to like our body. Like that doesn't make any sense. It's just like two different languages that are just like, this isn't making any sense.
Exactly. And some of the stuff that we've experienced is pre-verbal
Mm-hmm.
and is maybe your mind is also having a different experience than your nervous system. That's also
Exactly.
super interesting.
And allowing for that to exist. like allowing it to be different. Because I feel like, especially in our culture of like, I don't know, intellectualizing everything, it can be hard for us to recognize that. Like, oh, it's a different
Absolutely.
language.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Like you can feel okay, but your nervous system can say, hey, like that's actually way too much
Mhm.
for me to be able to handle right now and have a different reaction. And that's where we see sometimes where we become discordant with our body and we start viewing our body as a separate entity when it operates in a way where you're like, well, why are you slowing me down when
Right.
your body is just asking you to rest or
Yeah.
to take a beat before you keep
Oh,
going?
totally. I
Yeah.
agree. I know we forget about our bodies so often of the time. I feel like that's the conversation I have with my clients a lot as well is, just sending that one more email instead of having lunch or like these things where we're just like, I'm a machine and I need to give myself calories and I need to keep working instead of being like, no, I'm a body with a brain that blesses me with a job that I love. You know what I mean? Like having
Mhm.
this separation and also like the unity without being like, oh, it's just, I just have to work and my body doesn't really matter. She will catch up with me. That's when we get ourselves in those scenarios with anxiety or with burnout or with any sort of body fatigue like that, where we're just like, okay, why is my machine not keeping up with me? Well, maybe you haven't been keeping up with your machine.
Amen.
So this really makes sense and grounds into your brand, like ritual and routine. Because that was one of my questions for you today. I'm like, why ritual and routine? This makes sense now that you kind of answered my question. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about really that brand identity of ritual and routine. Because it sounds like that's really your grounding principle, as well as really what you teach your clients is how to sort of create a new routine and a new ritual that actually nourishes you.
Hmm. That's a beautiful reflection. It feels that way. Honestly, it's something that when I came down to what do I want the name of this to be, some like 8, 9 years ago,
Mhm.
which it grew really well with me. I'm so grateful for that.
It's amazing that that was 9
Oh
years
my
ago and it's
gosh.
still your brand name.
I know. And I
Because I'm sure
still
that you
love
have
it.
changed so much. And I'm sure everything that you've taught has changed. Like your brand is probably like a totally different brand with the same name. I think that's so beautiful that you have had that congruency through that much time.
Thank you. It feels
Yeah.
that way. It has iterated so much. But at the end of the day, where the pillars that I started with are the pillars that I stand by,
Mhm.
which are what are the algorithm of very simple things that help you to connect to yourself, to people in your community, and to God's source consciousness, whatever you subscribe to.
Mhm.
And from the jump, that was what impacted me the most. So when I started my business, it was more focused on psychosomatic, that psychosomatic connection. So how I saw are something that we may feel out of control with in our life,
Mhm.
creating eating disorders
Mhm.
or undigested trauma creating digestive illness.
Mhm.
That link to me between the mind and the body has always, always, always been so interesting because it has been the place where I have experienced, I think, like any healer, any coach, anyone who's in this space gets into this because of their own experience, because
Oh
of
yeah.
something that they've a contraction or expansion that they've experienced themselves. So
Mhm.
to come to the simplicity of practices and see how your rituals and routines, which what are rituals and what are routines? Routines are just those little things that help you to I just think of myself as plugging myself in through my
Yeah.
routine, through my ritual,
Mhm.
and ritual is simply routine or practice with deeper, more fleshed out intention.
Yeah.
So that namesake has followed me and or not followed me, let's say held me is a better word, through multiple iterations when I've gone through so many different chapters of starting off. There was a nutrition angle at one point when I started, and that I think over the like 5, 6 years ago, maybe kind of fell off and it became completely about um, the mind body, but body more so from a neural perspective and nervous system
Yeah.
perspective and a cellular trauma perspective than a nutritional perspective.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. And I feel like that's kind of where we're at. That's where I'm at as well in my practice is like I feel like with everything that I work with my clients on, acne, periods, all the things, 80%, I say this all the time, is emotional. 80% is whatever you believe being repeated within your cells. And oftentimes it's something that's passed down from your line as well. Like the cells that are within your body were the cells within your grandmother's body. And so, I mean, I feel like a lot of the healing work is energetic. A lot of it is, okay, what belief patterns are in the background of your brain all the time? Is it about worthiness? Is it resentment? Is it pain, trauma that is stored within the body and hasn't been addressed? Because I really believe that our body loves us so much. And any sort of symptom physically within the body is like, hey, I love you. Like, let's look at this thing. Let's look at this thing that keeps being perpetuated within your mind and is being mimicked within your cells and is being expressed within the body. So I love that you
Amen. So well
mentioned like the
said.
tie between the physical body and the emotional body and how we can't ignore the connection. We can't look at them as two separate entities.
Absolutely. And you really serve this when you're looking at
Mm-hmm.
hormones, when you're looking
Yes.
at the feminine body, especially feminine
Mm-hmm.
bodies, right? Like this is something that we see a lot with thyroid issues,
Mm-hmm.
with adrenals, with the womb space. It's so interesting how
Yeah.
the spaces where we experience contraction, so where we experience dis-ease,
Mm-hmm.
is usually correlated to something, a contraction that we've experienced in our life. So I know that you and I firsthand and serving clients have seen how
Mm-hmm.
powerful it is when someone can find freedom in their physical bodies and find freedom in their lives because of the connection.
Exactly. It's always so connected. I feel like that's one of the coolest things about my work. And you probably experience it in the same way, honestly, is when women come into my door and they're like, okay, I'm working on my fertility. Like, I want to clear out my skin. We do those things. But then the same woman like reaches like a 7-figure year and she is like in love and she like meets her man and like she has her baby. Like, it's just like everything is all wrapped up. And I think that's one of the special things I believe about being a woman is how interconnected and yet multifaceted we are. And in order to like, it's so special to be able to foster those experiences. And I'm sure you've experienced that as well in your work of like, okay, I want to help you with, let's say, anxiety. And then you help this woman with anxiety. And then you're like, wow, okay, your skin's cleared, your life has changed, you have a new job. Like things change pretty quickly.
They do when you're
Yeah.
willing to open up your foundation.
That's beautiful. So I want to hear, I'm sure you have so many. So maybe your top three like non-negotiable routines, like right now. What are your, I do this every day routines?
Absolutely. So I wake up and as soon I don't even leave the bed, you all. Like I used to roll out of bed and be like, okay, I'm going to sit on the floor. Now I don't even leave the bed. I put on my headphones as
Mhm.
soon as I wake up because that space when you're first waking up is such a malleable place for your brain.
Mhm.
So I wake up, I put on my headphones and I put on a hypnosis. So sometimes I use other people's hypnosis, but usually I record one for myself.
Okay.
So something that I'm working on, I'll record it for
Mhm.
myself. And I'll listen to that until I feel like I feel complete with it.
Mhm.
Or I have like a library of them that I work through, the ones that we have in Rituals, which is my
Yeah.
membership platform, my community for awake and aware individuals, full of practices to support people in embodiment and somatic practices and energetic practices. So I do a little plug there. So So for me, it's hypnosis. And then immediately from that space and hypnosis, I go into energy healing. So I go through similarly to what I do in the healings on my platform. I go through, I connect into, I work with source, God, universe, whatever you subscribe to. I'm working directly with what I call the 0 point,
Mhm.
or what my mentor really, who put me onto this word, calls the 0 point. So I connect into that. I open up the energy flow and then I go through a series of corrections,
Mhm.
where I am releasing attachments and energetic cords and fear and doubt. And then I'm filling myself with whatever it is that I want to envision for my day. So I'm selecting the mainframe for what I desire to experience that day. So I'll plant gratitude. I'll plant I'm willing to, or I'm willing, I desire to receive miracles today, or I will receive miracles today, or there's lots of little different quips that I reach for.
Mhm.
I trust, I surrender from thinking to knowing to being. So I go from the energy healing, and sometimes it's just quick correction and go. And then I also love to, within my somatic practice, especially after, if I'm in a yoga practice at the end, we'll revisit it and call in different energies from the quantum field, which I call the energetic pharmacy. I like to think of it in that way. To think of like, okay, how can I bring in a liberation for bliss or miracles or health, wealth, and bounty. There's like so many beautiful energies that you can, which is just an energy that you're calling from source, that you're inviting source to help you to release anything that is not in resonance with that energy. So for me, sometimes it's very simple, and sometimes it's an opportunity for deeper work where I'm working on ancestral stuff. I'm working on my lineage. I'm working on past life stuff. It just depends. And then it's always like exactly correct to the timing. It's beautiful how it works that way. And then I have somatic practice always. So somatic practice can mean many different things. For me, it means going to Pilates, going to yoga, connecting with my body, and using a low impact form of exercise, of working, of connecting with my body. Because when your brain knows where your body is in space, it feels safe. And to practice very consciously moving your body in a way where you're expanding your range tells your nervous system and expands the threshold of what your nervous system can hold. So for me, exercise and somatic practice at the beginning of my day are one and the same. But that's like, I'm setting myself up for my day, not so much a somatic practice where I'm going on an exploration of trauma, of limiting belief. So those are my top three. Simple.
I think that's one of the most refreshing things about what you just shared. Because I feel, especially for morning routines, that people can just get so overwhelmed and like lose track of their why, to where it almost feels like another thing that's bringing them into their cortisol response for the day. They like start off their day being like, oh, I have this like 12-step morning routine and I have to do every single one. And if I don't do one of them, then I beat myself up. So I love how you presented it with such simplicity, and also how you kind of mentioned, some days it looks a little bit different, but the framework is always the same.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And getting, and if in the morning, like, you don't get one of those pieces in, having a lot of compassion and then finding time at a different time during the day.
Exactly.
Sometimes we can become so dogmatic about the way we do things. Of course, it's really nice to be able to start your day. There's no doubt that if you start your day with this algorithm, it creates an environment that can produce a more aligned way of being, of course.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But being able to have flow and, to have flow within your practice, I think is very important as well.
Absolutely. I totally agree. So navigating that, especially as like a business owner and a feminine business owner, how do you structure your day to day? Like, do you wake up at a certain time every day? Do you have client calls blocked out? Like, how do you allow yourself to be supported by framework as a feminine entrepreneur?
So about the only thing about me that is really structured is that I am a diehard about my practices.
Okay.
Because I see how much they impact me and how much they set me up. I really love who I am when I'm participating in my morning practices and when I'm participating in my evening practices as well. My life is a lot about practice because that's my job.
Yeah.
So I kind of always am doing practice, but that's because that's what I'm here to do, is to be a professional tuning fork.
Right.
To stand alongside and be like, okay, I need to fully embody every aspect of this if I'm going to be holding the space for it.
Absolutely.
But for people, I don't necessarily think that's energetically correct for everyone to be practicing in the depth that I do. Getting in the simple practices goes a really long way.
Yes.
Wait, what was your question? I forgot.
So it sounds like your day basically is pretty just flow. Otherwise, I was like, how do you structure your day? Like, because I don't know, some feminine entrepreneurs are like, oh, like I have this structure Monday through Friday. Some women are like, I don't start my day till 12. Like everyone has it different. And I love to ask people. So I'd love to hear, especially since you've been in business for a long time by yourself, like what does it look like for you?
So I have a general idea. So a couple blueprint overlays that are there, but if I don't feel an integrity with it, I abandon it.
Yes.
which has been very interesting for God bless Maria, who's my director of
Yes.
operations, because I she's now in the flow with it. And she's also following the same rhythm. And
Mhm.
we're always checking in and making sure that we're on rhythm.
Mhm.
But I'm sure at the beginning, I'm like, I want to do this tomorrow. And I'm very certain about it. And then I wake up and I'm like, yeah, that's not happening. So I like to ease into my week.
Mhm.
Mondays and Fridays, I like to gently escalate. And
Mhm.
Tuesdays, Wednesday, Thursday is usually when a lot of the action is happening. So if I'm putting
Right.
in output, it's
Mhm.
happening that way. So I like to think of my week as a rolling wave,
Mhm.
that I'm outputting more in the middle of the week and
Mhm.
I'm putting more of that energy into myself
Mhm.
um in the weekends. So, which is kind of like what we're always doing, but I like it to be a more gentle entry.
Yeah.
And then I don't like to start my day until or interfacing with other people, let's say, because I do
Mhm.
start my day. My day starts around here in Costa Rica. It's a different story than New York. In New
Yeah, of
York,
course.
the energy of New York is super yang, so it's super
Mhm.
go go go, and it's pretty harsh on my nervous system. I love New York,
Yeah.
but and I'm learning how to use the energy of New York
Mhm.
to fuel me, which is
Yeah.
a new thing for me because I used to feel very oppressed by the energy of New York and be like, oh, this place is just destroying me. And it's funny how that narrative is now shifted, and I'm now feeling very fueled
Mhm.
by the energy of that place. Anyway, so that it's the same. It's the same framework, but it starts a little bit earlier naturally in Costa Rica because my
Mhm.
circadian rhythm is so on lock. I don't even need
Right.
an alarm clock.
Yeah.
Like I watch the sunset every day, and because I watch the sunset, my hormones know, you know all
Mhm.
about this.
Yeah.
My hormones are so in sync. I
Mhm.
get sleepy at the right time. I'm also not exposed to screens. I'm in nature all
Mhm.
day. So I go to bed super early. I'm waking up around 6:37
Yeah.
and putting on those headphones, starting the hypnosis, starting
Yeah.
the day. And I also love to work at night. So if
Mm.
I'm creating, oh, there is nothing I like better than putting on a rad playlist,
Yeah.
doing a somatic practice, getting
Mhm.
inspired by
Mhm.
practices, and then creating from that space or serving from that space. That for me is super fun. So I'm definitely a night owl. Mornings are for me.
Yeah. Mornings are your
Early
solo
afternoons are
time.
for me. Yeah,
Yeah.
me first.
Yeah.
And then from overflow, lovely to share.
Yes. Okay. I love that so much. See, that's like the synonymous thing that I hear across everyone has a different business model. Everyone has a different flow to their day. But I feel like the key to success is that inner union that you described. It's having this sense of heldness from for you, your routines. For everyone, it looks a little bit different, but having a sense of frame, having a sense of like masculine heldness to make you feel safe, provided for, like you get to be in overflow. Like we get to receive that from this masculine frame that we allow ourselves to be held by. And I'm sure that with a lot of the clients that you first onboard that are like, okay, I want to be like this, Mary. Like I want to be in this flow that you have. There's probably a lot of resistance that comes because there's always resistance that comes when we're trying to integrate a new habit, especially a new habit that's good for us, but allowing yourself to be held in this like masculine heldness. And then within that, to be able to flow, to be able to have the freedom from what you've created, to be able to be like, I don't really want to do that today. Or to be able to go to Pilates at 2 p.m. or, take the afternoon off because you want to go to the beach. Like that, in my opinion, is like inner union. And also, I feel like that's where we see feminine success really being rooted.
Definitely. I love that you're speaking to inner polarity right now
Mhm.
because it's so important.
It's so important. I feel like it's something that's often overlooked. We see women and anyone, but I work with women being on one side of the spectrum of like to-do list, waking up, having that 12-step morning routine, having that like teeny tiny cup of like oats that you weigh on a scale, just like having no pleasure. You know what I mean? And then diving into work, sending emails, skipping lunch, like staying up super late working, but not from the way that you're talking about of like this juiciness, but of like, oh, I need to be doing these things because of this harsh inner voice. And then we also see on the other end, like women just being so in their feminine, they're like, oh, I'm just gonna like lay on the couch and call in money, and like that's not really gonna work either. So I think that it's just so important to have the conversation about inner union because, like I said, I think that's really where, especially as women, we receive the like seed of like provision in order to create with our womb space within our feminine flow, huge access to abundance.
Mm, so well said.
The juice.
The juice.
The juice of
Cultivating
life.
the juice. Yeah.
Yes,
Finding the yin
cultivate
and
the
the
juice.
yang.
Exactly.
Damn, I love that. It's so good. Oh, is it okay that I cuss on here? Um, I love
Yes,
that.
it's fine.
That's okay, good. It's beautiful.
Um, I want to kind of take this back a little ways. I think earlier this year, it might have been last year when you were sharing on your Instagram story and in your journey that you hit a place of burnout and really just dive into that. Like, what did burnout look like for you? How did you get there? And then we'll kind of bring it into how like you got to where you are right now.
Burnout. Wow, that was
Burnout.
wild. Burnout was wild because I have faced many contractions in my life. And when I say
Mhm.
contractions, it's because I don't like to speak in like bad things. I don't
Mhm.
necessarily resonate with using that type of language. And sometimes I realize that it sounds like I'm speaking in riddles because I try to be so intentional. So, for the purposes of this conversation, let's say I've had a lot of traumas that I've experienced in my
Yeah.
life that have contracted and molded in the contractedness
Mhm.
have molded me into the person that I am today. So I've
Mhm.
downloaded lessons and experiences from being squeezed in those spaces.
Mhm.
And it's oftentimes that it's something like a trauma that has led to an initiation of an expansion of something really beautiful that I've gotten to reap from that experience.
Mhm.
And burnout was really interesting because it wasn't one thing, like nothing happened. I just
Mhm.
slowly was self-abandoning. I thought my boundaries were really good,
Mhm.
but in the spectrum of where I started to what's possible,
Yeah.
they were good for an iteration of myself.
Mhm.
And then I had cycled out of that iteration of myself and not looked at my energetic boundaries and
Yeah.
questioned them.
Yeah.
And because of that, I found myself moving, making moves out of scarcity in my
Mhm.
business, acting in discordance with my body. So what we were just talking about,
Mhm.
like feeling very feminine flow at certain times, but then really pushing beyond my nervous system needs, really pushing
Yeah.
beyond what my body wanted me to do. And doing that consistently, I was like, okay, I'm burnt out. There was one retreat at the end of June that I was like, okay, because I also hold a lot of personal one-on-one retreats, which I'm
Mhm.
now not really doing anymore.
Mhm.
Because I don't, even though they're so much fun and so beautiful, it is really hard for me to hold a mask because I'm being the masculine
Oh yeah.
in those containers, right? I'm holding these people. It's really beautiful to be able to do it in work, but when you're one-on-one,
Mhm.
you're like really,
I can't
you're in it.
imagine.
You're
Yeah.
in it.
It's a lot of
Um,
responsibility.
it's so powerful. It's so beautiful. But
Yeah.
there was one retreat in June where I was like, okay, I'm totally wiped. And it just hit me. And I was
Mhm.
like, I need to take a break. I need to take a break from work.
Mhm.
Um, and you can tell it's burnout when you're feeling this, my work is my life. Like
Yeah.
it runs through my veins. I dream about it. It's just like when you do this type of work, you just, you have to, it has to be your life.
Yeah.
It's an embodiment because your life becomes a blueprint for
Mhm.
your work. Everything that you're going through, you're also witnessing it from that witness consciousness, from that lens. And because it's so developed through your work, you're able to download perspectives and blueprints that you then get to pass on. So I like to think of myself as like a pioneer that's going through and traversing territory and then
Yeah.
reporting back, right?
Right.
Or professional tuning fork. I have like a lot of little like quips that I like to use. Um, but I thought, okay, well, I'll just take a break from work,
Mhm.
which I usually do anyways in the summer. July and August, I like to take off from being like really active in the
Mhm.
workspace and just enjoy life.
Right.
And I then thought that by taking that workspace off and filling myself socially,
Mhm.
I thought, okay, this will be a lot of fun. Like I'll just have a lot of fun. I was living in Ibiza in the summer. I know, very beautiful life, and which I'm
Mhm.
so grateful for. But I basically traded input in work into input for social life. So my social life became like very extreme because I wasn't working so hard.
Yeah.
And that was really beautiful. And it was giving me a lot. And I'm so grateful. But I was not listening to my body, like both
Right.
circumstances. I was not taking the step back and giving myself the rest and the recuperation that I truly needed. And
Mhm.
then I found myself at the beginning of August feeling like crying every day, without rhyme or reason, feeling so disconnected from work, not feeling apathetic, and childlike. And that was a really interesting experience, was to be admitting to the people around me also that I really needed to take space and time to completely rest, to rest from socializing, to rest from work. And it gave me the opportunity to work through my own lenses and my own programs around allowing that to happen, and like actually allowing that to happen. Because there were a couple non-starters where I was starting to do that, and then scarcity would set in. I'd be like, oh, I have to make something, or I have to be a part of this social thing. And then it finally hit a point where I was so burnt out. I couldn't show up in in my friendships. I couldn't show up in my business. I couldn't show up for myself. So I said, okay, pause everything. I'm pausing everything, and I'm coming back to simplicity. I'm coming back to the practices that I'm already always doing, but I'm going to juice those up, and I'm going to make those the center. I'm going to make my connection to self the center. I'm going to make my connection to source the center, and I'm going to focus on me. And that focusing on me, pulling back in the business, which was an initiation within itself, because I have an employee. And that required a lot of trust. It was really scary.
That is scary. And also really brave. Yeah.
Yeah. But I knew, I was like, this is the only way.
Right.
This is the only way it's going to happen. At the same time, I was going through a really intense energetic mentorship. My mentor told me, she was like, you should stop working. And in my mind, I'm like, yeah. But like, you don't know.
You're like, easy for you to say.
I'm like, you don't know how resilient I am and how I'm actually strong enough for this. And she was right. And I was not. So, yeah, it was a good lesson. And then I pulled back and I focused on myself. And from that space, came back into the business, into social life with integrity and with power. And it has led to immense growth for me personally, immense growth for my business.
Right.
And you really see, I mean, you're part of the rituals community as well. Like, you see how these practices, like when you just come to the simplicity and the integrity of how you're showing up, how powerful they become.
Right.
Totally. And how people really respond to them. So it's been a really beautiful journey. And also seeing how like my body reacted. How for me, when I'm not fueling myself, I can fluctuate with my weight in either way. So I can get, without noticing, I can get really, really thin, and I'm already like, I'm 5'10". I'm already pretty lean. Or I can swing the opposite direction where my body feels like it needs more grounding. So I keep on more weight, or I clench my jaw, so my cheeks become inflamed, or I get moon phase, or my body's always sending me signs and signals, and I read them pretty well. And then it's just whether I decide to listen to them or not. So I really decided to make a deeper commitment. It's interesting when you're in this line of work too, you watch all of this happen. Like the whole time this was happening, I knew it was going on. It's not like I was jaded. But I just wasn't, the voices of fear and of separation, of scarcity, happened to be stronger at that point in time than my knowing. So it was a really good lesson in tapping back into knowing, and seeing that when you do take that rest, and when you do follow that intuitive knowing, how much abundance and how much life really takes care of you.
Oh, absolutely. Rest, I feel like, is always the precursor to like that relaunch, that success. But we have so much tension towards that because it's just easier to hear those voices of fear rather than those voices of love sometimes. And your body always knows. Our brain is like the monkey. Our brain is the one who's like, just have its own little party. That's not really true, but your body knew. And it sounds like you were like almost a third party, like watching your body respond and like knowing what to do, but being like, oh my gosh, this is scary.
Yeah, it was very scary.
And it sounds like, and I love the way you described it, and getting to like witness you and the story, and for your authenticity. I really appreciate that, because I know this will be really expansive for so many women. But it feels like, as a listener, it feels like your structures weren't robust enough for the woman who you were to become. Like, you were going, like, God, universe, like whatever you subscribe to was like, this woman is going to take on so much, and she's going to be a space holder for so many. And like, I'm almost going to push her so that her essence becomes so big and so vast that she can't fit into these like little puny routines that were a past version of herself. And I think it's really beautiful too that you got this opportunity to step back and build your structure again to hold so much more and then kind of step into it, because that's really the foundation of your business as well. So like you truly are an embodiment of everything that you teach. And I think that's really special. I think that's something that I have certainly noticed about your essence is that you are like a walking testimony to your work. You can feel that energy even just following you on Instagram and being a part of your membership group. So thank you for all that you are and for sharing that. I think it's going to be really expansive for women listening.
Yeah, it's so important to be transparent
Mm-hmm.
and not to have ego, to be humble and to
Mm-hmm.
say, I needed to come back to the drawing board. And
Mm-hmm.
I love that reflection of what you spoke to,
Mm-hmm.
because I definitely feel that way.
Yeah.
That the universe, God source, whatever you subscribe
Mm-hmm.
to, was like, hey, you're being called up for more. And
Mm-hmm.
the way that things are working right now needs to be refined for you to
Mm-hmm.
be able to hold the next iteration of yourself. It's no longer working.
Absolutely.
We're gonna push her back against the wall until you listen to your body,
Exactly.
and you're gonna break down and you're gonna reformulate. And from that place, you're going to be the embodiment of the individual that can hold this next iteration of business, of practice, and of profound inner integrity. That became for
Yeah.
me. I love how you say inner union. That's so beautiful. And I think for me that mirrors as inner integrity
Mm-hmm.
of making inner integrity the most important thing in my life, keeping my
Yeah.
midline clear. When I say midline, I mean my energetic body,
Mm-hmm.
which also presents into my actions, my words, my thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Just always checking in from a space of, is this allowing me to be all that I am? Is this allowing me to come from a place of allowance and acceptance rather than doubting and denying?
Exactly. So for women that are listening that are resonating with what you're talking about and are like, maybe they have their own business as well. A lot of my listeners are female entrepreneurs in the coaching space. So I want to pull back the veil a little bit. So what did it look like when you went from being burnt out to stepping away? Because if there are women listening that are like, okay, I'm burnt out, but I still need to be able to pay my assistant, like you kind of mentioned. How did you make that happen? Like, the membership was still going on? Were you still having one-to-one clients, or were you like, nope, no clients anymore? Like, what did it actually look like?
So, what it looked like, I had one-to-one clients.
Mm-hmm.
So, I work on retainer.
Okay.
I had one-to-one clients, but I did ask them to put it on hold.
Okay.
So, I
Amazing.
did have, and things were tight.
I'm sure.
Um, I think it's actually super important to be transparent about that,
Me
because
too.
I've had moments in my business where I've had so much financial abundance, which
Mm-hmm.
has been awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And that was not the case
Mm-hmm.
when I went through this experience, because I assumed that things would go according to the rhythm that they had, which was
Mm-hmm.
a lot of financial abundance, the
Mm-hmm.
opportunity to live in so many different places. Like my life is it is pretty amazing. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's by design. I travel a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I live each day in the exact way that I'd want to live it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, However, I live each day exactly how I would like to live it. And it didn't go according to plan. Sometimes life
Right.
doesn't go according to plan. And so
Mm-hmm.
the resources, I had enough resources for a certain point to be able to hold it. But
Mm-hmm.
then there became a point where I was like, okay, financially, how am I going to do this? Like,
Mm-hmm.
how? And it required a lot of trust. It required a lot of trust within myself, within my business. So I pulled back in the membership. I wasn't as present as now. We're doing like 9 to 10 life practices a month, and it's like
Right.
very involved, which is really beautiful to be able to come
Mm-hmm.
to that space. And with my one-on-one clients, I had to take a pause with them, um, things got lean for a
Mm-hmm.
second. And that was really hard because I've been making pretty good. I've been receiving really well financially for a while now.
Yeah.
And so that was interesting because I basically live in I hold an apartment in New York, and then I also was living in Ibiza. And so it was
Mm-hmm.
like, it was interesting. Um,
Absolutely.
so it required me to become resourceful and
Mm-hmm.
to also look at to take a step back. And I think for me, it was like abundance, abundance, abundance. It's always coming. It's always coming, which it is.
Yeah.
But also to look at, okay, am I spending from a place of alignment, and to look at like the places where I was also leaking energetically as well. So it was a really good inventory of all of those things, of like, of leaking energetically within friendships and relationships, leaking energetically within my financial. Going through this experience gave me the opportunity to take an inventory of everything. Totally. So yeah, I had to become resourceful. And because of that pullback, and because of sticking to the integrity and not doing, like, I could have very easily just taken on 2 more clients and it would have been fine. But I knew that if I did that, I'd be going against inner integrity. And if I went against inner integrity, the universe was going to just crack me over its leg another time. So I was like, I'm going to just take this one.
Yeah.
And really learn.
Yeah. That's what I assumed, because I feel like you're very much a woman of integrity, but I was like, let's just pull this veil back, because I feel like there's going to be people listening that they're like, sure, sure. Yeah. Right. Like, you were still working. Because I feel like that's what we do when we are business owners. You know what I mean? We're just like, you have to be working. Like, we have all these like mindset things in the back of our mind. But something I want to share with listeners as well, who aren't familiar with Mary and her work and her Instagram page, is she recently grew tremendously. Like, so vastly. Your account has grown so quickly. There's so many more members inside the membership. Like, it grew so much, so fast. And I personally, after listening to the story, I'm like, well, this makes complete sense. Like, you had the integrity to step back, build a bigger structure, and now you can take up more space. But I'd love to hear in your own words, like, how would you explain the transition from burnout into this place of absolute overflow that you're in right now?
Thank you for that reflection. And I'm so glad that you see that. The burnout was such a gift in that way. Like, it really pulled the arrow back in a profound way. So it went burnout, dedication, and devotion. Devotion's been a big, big word for me. To simplicity, to simplicity of practices, and to inner integrity. So showing up, even if it was just meant that I did my practices and then I just like laid around and read books, or like, you know, I did a lot of not doing, right? I did a lot of being. And that within itself is such a trip, you know. Devotion. And then from that devoted place, I changed as a person. Yeah. My energy changed. Everything about me changed. And it was such a beautiful metamorphosis. And because of that energy change, and how connected, and how I had to choose, I had to decide to be supported by the universe. Yeah. And a part of me, like, there's a cynic on the side that's like psychically sitting next to me right now. That's like, ugh. Like, I used to scoff at people who'd be like, oh, like, supported by the universe, supported by the connection. But it's a real thing. And that's what came through for me, was just, if I can just stay committed to myself, and the truth of myself, and the truth of the universe, God, I say God, but of God supporting me, that it will all come from there. And of course you have to take actual steps, of course, but the actual steps is coming from a place of love, and of alignment, and truth, and feeling of truth, and without an ounce of scarcity, because the world can sniff out inauthenticity. The world can sniff out scarcity. Like, it's a felt experience. Yeah. We could be saying the same thing, but if I am feeling scarce, if I am coming from a place of fear, and I'm saying that, people can feel that. So that for me is where I think my growth came from, is that people saw me putting out content, came to these practices, and they feel, because what am I doing really within the practice? Like, I'm not really healing you. Right. I call myself a healer, but I'm not doing that. I'm holding a container and I'm giving you cues. I'm a tuning fork, and I'm like, hey, if you vibrate like this, invite yourself to vibrate like this. See, try that on. If that feels in resonance with you, great. If it doesn't, also okay and beautiful. That it can provide you a deeper connection with yourself, a deeper connection with source, a deeper connection with your community. And that consistency, and that devotion, that integrity to that connection is what provided the growth. That's what
absolutely.
Happened. Absolutely. People feel that. And I know that I can hold it. I know that I can hold that growth. And to me, I don't see it stopping. Whereas before, I think that I didn't feel fully ready. I think I
Yeah.
wanted it, but I didn't feel fully ready to hold, our community doubled within 1 month.
Mhm.
My following went from 20,000 people in December, is now January, to 53,000 people. So
Mhm.
it just, and I really feel like it's just going to continue.
It
I
will.
can say that with certainty. And that's not
Mhm.
like I'm not attached to the outcome. If it doesn't happen, that's okay.
Mhm.
But it just feels like that's what's needed of me right now, is just to be an
Mhm.
agent of this modality, of these modalities that help people to become connected and help people to really put the power in their hands to be their own healers.
Right.
People need that. People don't need, I'm someone who's sitting and standing, sitting, however, I don't know. I'm being next to you. I'm being next to you, and I'm just like everyone else. And I'm inviting you into more devotion.
Mhm. Exactly. Exactly. And I think it's that accountability piece too is something that's so special about a membership in particular, is like you're surrounded by a community of women who, like I said, when you create new habits, a lot of the times you don't want to do them, but you're like surrounded by a community of women that are like, yeah, we feel the same way and we're doing them. Like it's kind of this motivation, like sisterhood feeling that is incredible. So to be able to facilitate that, I feel like that's really what coaching is. A lot of the times you're simply a mirror and a facilitator.
Definitely.
Mm.
Yeah. And how healing community is.
Right.
How we
Exactly. And
really need to heal in
historically,
community.
we've always
Yeah.
healed in community as women. But for some reason, I feel like a lot of the times in our current culture, we run from that. Like it's scary. Like there's a lot of sisterhood wounds, a lot of mother wounds, a lot of reasons why that's so uncomfortable. And I think that's something that is worth mentioning. I mean, I think that's something that we also heal by being willing to step into programs that are group programs and require a little bit more vulnerability, or memberships such as your own as well, with a community of people and mostly women who are like doing the same things on the same path, having the same resistances, and being reminded that they're not alone.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's
That we're all mirrors
amazing.
of each other.
Exactly. Well, I'm celebrating you big time for your growth and also just for the amazing example that you get to share with women and mirror it into the work that you have. Like that's just so special. You get to hold that space for women to be like, hey, like this isn't just something that happened to me. Like there's nothing like special about me. Like this is accessible for you too. And be like, this is how it's accessible.
It's exactly.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think we tend to gravitate towards these experiences that provide like really grandiose, extreme, magnificent experiences and responses.
Mhm.
At the end of the day, it really just comes down to, like, sometimes I think it used to feel really boring to me.
Mhm.
So I would juice things up. I juice up the story. And for a
Mhm.
while, like when I went to like shamanism and whatnot, and had
Mhm.
my whole like, medicine woman era and whatever. Um, I think our nervous systems can be really wired to feel like, okay, we need to go for like the most extreme experience in order,
Yeah.
we want to like feel alive, but
Mhm.
to come back to simplicity
Mhm.
and letting things be a little boring.
Mhm.
God, there's so much medicine in that. There's so much
Mhm.
medicine simplicity. So that's, I think, like the number one thing I want to drive is like, even if you're feeling bored by practice, that that simplicity, if you take that step each day, we already know this. I'm not saying anything new. Everyone knows what
Mhm.
I'm saying right now,
Right.
but it will fundamentally change your life.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's the space where we step into our design, in my opinion, as like as a feminine being. So a lot of the
Mm.
times we're actually living outside of biology. I mean, if we literally look at biologically male, female, right? Masculine, feminine energy, like masculine energy is penetrative, feminine energy is spacious. However, as women in our current culture, we want to be penetrative. We want to take up all this space all the time, doing all these things. We want our brain to be in absolute overdrive. Like we can't even like take a freaking bath without listening to a podcast or watching a show. Like we have to have like things in our brain all the time. And it's like a trauma response. But the real work starts when you can actually create spaciousness and just be there and exist and allow for things to show up, because the things that show up are invitations into deeper healing. And I mean, I'm sure that when you had that spaciousness in your life, probably so much came up for you. So many of those inner voices, so many inner dialogues, so many programmings from childhood, from things that people told you about success, from what you need to be doing, like all the things, and having a representation of, hey, I was able to do this and look what the impact was for my life, I think is going to be really expansive.
Very well articulated.
Thank you. I
Yes.
appreciate that. What a beautiful conversation, Mary. I've loved every second of this.
Likewise, it's been so nice to connect with you and to there's such beautiful synergy. It just feels like there's a beautiful flow and a
Yes,
message coming across. And
I
I'm excited
agree. We're very much
for
in resonance.
yeah, definitely.
I have a few like fun little rapid fire questions to ask
Ooh,
you.
fun.
Yeah. Okay. What is something that you're really into right now? It could be anything. It could be a hobby. It could be a face mask. It could be anything.
Ecstatic dance.
Okay, I love that.
I love, oh my God, I love dancing more than anything. More than anything.
Yeah, get that body moving.
Like, oh, I love to shake my hips. Like,
Hmm.
yeah, like a good
Amazing.
bass. Wow. Yeah,
I
that's what
love
came to
that.
mind. That and
Okay.
papaya chia bowls. If I'm going to be totally honest,
Papaya chia bowls.
the first thing that popped into my mind, and I was like, no, you can't say that. And then
Yes,
it
you
said
can.
dancing, and I went for dancing, but also papaya chia bowls.
Can you please describe that to me? I'm literally trying to picture it in my mind. Is it like the chia, like chia pudding inside the papaya?
Yes, and it's
That sounds
magic.
amazing.
And maybe because that's what I want right now, but it is
I want
yeah,
that right now
it's a
too.
papaya scooped out, like
Okay.
or the seeds scooped out
Yeah.
with a chia seed pudding on the inside. They have it here in
Wow.
Costa Rica. And the papaya here, I thought I wasn't a papaya person. Not true. I am a papaya person. I'm just a in season papaya person, which makes sense.
Which makes
Um,
sense.
yeah, so I really wanted it to be spicier than that, but like
No, that's spicy to me.
simplicity.
Yeah, we care about that.
Yeah,
Okay.
so good.
Amazing. What is your favorite beauty tip? Just one thing.
Ooh.
Us girlies, we love the beauty
Oh God,
tips.
it's so hard because I'm very extra about beauty tips. I would say, oh God. Um, okay, Mary, don't think too much about this.
Don't think about it.
Um, I'm like, I have so much that I want to say, but probably the thing I do a face mask almost every day.
Okay. Which one?
Yeah. I rotate between a lot of them. I
Okay.
really like the Biologique VPO2 mask.
Okay.
So I'll go between um hydrating masks. There's a couple, there's what is the brand down here? I think it's called SALVIA. I think that's the brand. And they have a couple of beautiful mud masks. I love to
Mm,
go to places and go to like local apothecaries,
yeah.
local beauty bars and find local masks they make. I love sheet masks. I love
Mhm.
skincare. I think this comes from my little sister. My little sister is really wilds out on skincare, like really wilds out. It's beautiful. And she put me onto it, but I love the action. Like I spend probably 30 minutes every evening gua shaing, doing new
Mhm.
face, putting on a face mask. It just feels really juicy. Juicy. We keep saying that. Feels
The
really juicy.
juice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. And also that's a ritual and routine.
Sure is.
Circling back.
Yeah, yeah.
Amazing. Okay. If you could tell 10 years ago, Mary, one thing, what would it be?
Trust your gut. Your intuition is never wrong.
Beautiful. I love that. Simplicity to that message, especially
Yes.
because I feel like we get into our brains so quickly. But that's one of the special things, especially about being a woman and being kind of a portal, is that we know the answer in our bodies. So trusting your gut is just, whew.
Yeah, I think I spent a lot of years of my life taking what others thought or they just looking at reflections from
Mhm.
other people and weighing that more
Yeah.
than what I intuitively knew to be true. So to build as much self-trust as possible and know that that will always
Mhm.
guide you, even when it logically doesn't make sense in the
Yeah.
direction that you're supposed to go.
Amazing. Okay. I love it. Those are all my questions for you today. So I want to wrap up our convo with where can people find you? How can they work with you?
Beautiful. And thank you for having me. This has been
Yes.
so beautiful to connect with you and have this conversation. People can find me at Ritual and Routine on Instagram. That's the best place to find me. And from that place, you can find access to Rituals by Ritual, which is our online community, which also has a lot of beautiful in-person offerings that are coming to New York City to LA, hopefully very soon, and beautiful retreat experiences in Osada and Ibiza. So definitely be on the lookout for that. Join our newsletter, which you can all access by going to the link in my bio when you go to my Instagram page. If you come and you decide to be a part of our awake and aware conscious community that is Rituals, you will be able to access live breathwork journeys, live energy healings, live somatic practices, amongst a lot of beautiful resources, workshops, and a group of people who are on a similar path who want to embody and to become all that they are.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Thanks for being a guest on the podcast.
Thanks, Rachel.